YouTube live. If you're watching again, just scroll forward time just to um, grab yourself a glass of something, and then I'll be back just in a minute or two. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this YouTube live in which I'd planned to be welcoming autumn, but with events of this week so recent and raw, I thought it would just be wise to create some space for us to pause and reflect and give thanks and breathe in together within the sadness and the tumult. And I'm aware that I expect a lot of people are probably still watching the service. So if you're watching this on catch up, welcome, and I really hope that this blesses you. And thank you for joining me live, those of you who have done. So I hope that that's okay with you. It rained here yesterday afternoon. Biblically, I don't know what it was like with you, but it was like an outpouring as we awaited news of the Queen. The heavens opened as heaven itself was opening to welcome one more of God's children home. And then there was that sight of the rainbow over Windsor Castle, wasn't there? I don't know if you saw it. At the moment, the flag was being lowered to half mast, and a rainbow at Buckingham Palace around the same time. And whether they appeared by divine appointment or were simply moments of delightful serendipity, they were a reminder, as they always are, of God's covenant love for us all, which will see us through the storm. On this sad but equally hope-filled night, I'm going to light a candle, and this week it's to remember the light that Queen Elizabeth always sought gently to point us towards in her role as a servant leader, pointing us to the light of Christ, the light of her life. None of us are invincible. though we probably hoped or begun to hope that the Queen might be. But all of us, as she knew so well, are offered the unconditional love of God, which shines like a light in the darkness. So we light this candle tonight. One of the Queen's favourite phrases, apparently, or quotes, someone was saying on television today, was that grief is the price we pay for love. And as we remember the Queen today, I'm sure it will also be reminding us of those that we have loved and lost personally. And I feel personally especially mindful of those in the generations preceding us. People like my grandma, I remember, who lived through the war and held the Queen and her parents in especially high esteem and loving affection. A generation of people who came from a world that's very much now passing into memory. So if you're being reminded through today's events, this week's events, of a relative or friend, please would you put their name in the chat if you can, as we pause just for a few moments quiet now to give thanks for them as well as for the life of the Queen. Your friends Vince and Mandy, Miriam, thank you. Your Aunt Prue, an ardent royalist who died of COVID, Victoria, thank you. Your mum Isabel, your husband Peter, Elizabeth. I'm sure there's all sorts of people. Oh, Misty the dog has just died. Sorry to hear that, Anne. Your mum Blue, Malcolm and Marion, Maud, Bob. So there's all sorts of people who you knew who took great delight in the Queen, who were from that generation. Julia, we remember Julia. And it connects us. An event like this connects us, doesn't it? It connects us back. And holds us in a particular space. It's not often that we're actually just held in this space together, is it? And so we remember those who kind of came before us and whose lives are interwoven, as we remember kind of how interwoven we are with the public life of the Queen. We all have our memories. Just keep those names coming if you'd like to, but we all have our memories, and whether you're a monarchist or not, it is a profound moment, isn't it, to reflect together and personally and spiritually about something we all shared. My earliest memories, I think, involved the Silver Jubilee. Elsie, I'm sorry if you've lost your sound. Does everybody else have sound? If someone could just advise Elsie what to do on the chat. I don't know what to advise Elsie, but hopefully you've got sound. Great, thank you, Anne. She might have just popped it on mute or something, I don't know. Anyway, going back to 1977, the Silver Jubilee. I don't know what it was about kind of looking back to those days, but when you look back now, they almost seem to be, you imagine them in almost that old-fashioned technicolor, don't you? So I imagine red, white and blue bunting and boys in shorts and girls in green gingham dresses dancing around a maypole, and then us queuing up to get our Silver Jubilee souvenir mugs. Perhaps your memories go back farther still. But it is interesting how they all interweave, isn't it? And how at this time we remember that we all interweave with this cultural memory. I think for me, one of the most profound moments of connection for me was when the Queen addressed the nation during the pandemic. I don't know if you remember, but she ended by saying this: we should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. Do you remember that? And I'm sure she was evoking in that the eternal as well as the temporal when she quoted Vera Lynn in that really kind of moving way. I won't forget the recent Paddington Bear moment either, will you? There's something, truly something about that short cameo in that video she did for the Platinum Jubilee concert with Paddington that just cuts through emotionally. And it's not just the cuteness, is it? It was around the time the British government was talking about sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, and the fact that Paddington Bear had sought and found asylum here in Britain was almost certainly not lost on the Queen, nor was the fact that the stories of Paddington Bear celebrate character values of kindness, politeness, tolerance, vulnerability, goodness, welcome, hospitality, values which, again, have not gone uncontested in recent days. One of the writers, I don't know if you saw on the television this morning, one of the writers of that Paddington sketch, a radiant man called Frank Cottrell Boyce was interviewed, and he spoke very beautifully about how this little video was effectively the Queen's sign off to the nation. It was the last recorded thing she did. Elsie, I'm so relieved you're back and it had gone on mute. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. We're just talking about the Paddington Bear moment. I'm reliving that. And the man who helped write that sketch was saying it was the last recorded thing that she did, and how she did it with so much joy as a woman of faith, he said. He really noted this, even ending up by tapping the teaspoon on her teacup in time to Queen's We Will Rock You as she smiled and laughed. I hope you remember that. Frank Cottrell Boyce quoted a Yeats poem: soul, clap its hands and sing, and louder sing, and said that this was, in a sense, how she wanted to bow out, knowing and showing that for her, as someone of faith, there is better yet to come, even in those sunset days. And I personally just draw great encouragement from that, and love to draw encouragement from anyone, especially people who are really old or have been suffering kind of really debilitating illness, but who carry a lightness with them because of their faith. That kind of lightness that comes with people sometimes. It gives me great hope to keep living each of my own days well to the last. Perhaps there's someone you know or have known like that who has really inspired you that you can recall now. And perhaps you can be that inspiration for others. Wouldn't that be great? I guess the most obvious thread that weaves kind of our lives kind of into the public life of the Queen is it's sitting down after Christmas lunch, isn't it, each year at 3 p.m. and watching the Queen's speech for those of us who do. And I'm really grateful to Mark Green, my friend and former colleague at LICC, who's written some lovely stuff about the Queen as a servant leader. And there was a little article published in which he drew out 10 lovely segments from some of her speeches over the years, which especially draw upon her faith and her faithfulness. And so I just wanted to pull out 3 very short snippets from his 10, which will help us to reflect for a few quiet moments together. And I'll put a link to his article in the notes for this video underneath once it goes up. So the first small excerpt I wanted to pull out is uh, 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 kind of titled "The Only Way to Live My Life," which was from some words she spoke in 2002. Here's what she said: "I know just how much I rely on my faith to guide me through the good times and the bad. Each day is a new beginning. I know," she says, "that the only way to live my life is to try to do what is right, to take the long view, to give of my best in all that the day brings, and to put my trust in God." And I just love that. I absolutely love that. The only way to live my life is to try to do what's right, take the long view, give of my best in all the day brings, and put my trust in God. So I just wanted to ask you, in a quiet moment of reflection, if you were to try to summarize the only way to live your life, I wonder if you could begin to distill that way in just a few words, like she did. Just begin to with a phrase or sentence. Just have a think for 20 seconds about how would you finish the line, "The only way to live my life is to try to dot, dot, dot." Just think of one thing, perhaps. And when you're ready, in the next 20 seconds or so, it would be amazing if some of you would just share a word or a phrase to finish that sentence off. The only way to live my life is to try to be authentic. Thank you, Liz. To look only to Jesus. Thank you, Richard. To give, to pray, to love, to hope, Miriam. To walk with God, Elsie. To live with integrity, to follow his way. I really like that challenge. The only way to live my life is to try, to trust and to remain surrendered, Sarah. Thank you. Care for my soul, keep connected and look out and up, trusting in our Father's unconditional love. Thank you. To be thankful. You might like to return to this, just inspired by the Queen and our session, just to write, just to finish off, just to help you to distill kind of life's wisdom, your life's way into just a few words. To love more. Thank you, Mum. To try to always be attentive to the present moment, Elizabeth. To make a difference, to keep trusting in God in every situation, however hard. Thank you so much for sharing those. I really, really appreciate it. And it just helps us to see where we are as a group within that. Thank you. Keep those coming. To be curious and creative, Fiona, thanks. To try to breathe lots of love in and out. To see something of God's image in everyone I meet each day, Hazel. Two other snippets from the Queen's speeches that I wanted to highlight. The first, from 2012, is on love and service. This is the time of year, she said, when we remember that God sent his only Son to serve, not to be served. He restored love and service to the center of our lives in the person of Jesus Christ. For me, that's a lovely reminder that, like Peter, we must first receive Jesus's love and service, allow him to wash our feet, if you like, before that love can flow through us in acts of service to others. So just for a moment now, I'd like to invite you to just resolve again to receive that love and service at the center of your life. And as we've done a few times on these YouTube lives, just to borrow from James Finley's breathing exercise, breathing in what he calls God's silent I love you. Just imagine as you breathe, take a nice deep breath in on the in breath, that you hear God saying, I love you, and breathing that deep into the center of your being. So just taking a nice deep breath now in, just hearing those words, I love you. Just receiving that just into the very center of your being, and breathing out nice and slowly. And breathing in again, God's silent, I love you. Just really deeply, just fill your lungs, fill your heart with that truth, and then breathing out once more. And then once more in, breathing in God's silent, I love you. And breathing out. Now we'll just put our response, our I love you, in on the out breath, just to remind us of our response. So breathing in God's silent, I love you. And we breathe out our I love you to God and to the world around us in response. And breathing in God's silent, I love you. And breathing out your I love you in response. And just for 3 or 4 more breaths now, let's do that in silent reverence together. The last snippet is from the Queen's speech in 2013, titled this one, No One is Beyond God's Love. For Christians, she wrote, reflection, meditation, and prayer help us to renew ourselves in God's love. That's such an important reminder in itself, isn't it? It all helps us, our practice helps us to renew ourselves in God's love. There's enough wisdom in that one line to last us for the rest of the week. But she continues, it's a love that is for everyone. There is no one beyond its reach. There is no one beyond its reach. So why not for a moment hold in your heart someone who you know who's just really struggling at the moment, who could really do with being renewed in God's love afresh, and breathing that in, and just for a moment pray for them now. Just hold them gently without words in your heart. Picture them. And you're very welcome to pop their first name in the chat if you would like to. But remembering in this moment that there is no one beyond the reach of God's love. Just put any names that you would like to in the chat, just as a sort of overflow of that, as an expression, if you'd like to. Jean, thank you. Jessie, I'm remembering Michelle tonight. Any more names, let those flow, and we offer them up to God now. Your mum plus Jason and Dougie, Joyce, thank you. And as those names continue, and as we edge towards our close now, let's recall again the image of the rainbow, shall we? And consider how, just for a moment, how God's love has reached to you over the years. Isn't it amazing how one person's death, and of course she was internationally regarded, but one person's death can just actually prompt some really beautiful reflection on the nature of life and love. So we think of the rainbow and remember how God's love has reached to you over the years, especially kind of through the rain of difficult days. It might have arrived perhaps in the form of a faithful friend or stranger even, a moment of encouragement, support, perhaps some healing or restoration, a moment of wonder and reconnection. Give thanks for something in this quiet pause that you're especially grateful for in that regard. We've heard quite a lot about the Queen's faithfulness. We think that there is a faithfulness that surpasses that. Thanks, Elsie. I'll change that. I had a few issues just before we kind of went live today. That was meaning that I didn't have time to shave, and I made a typo. I am always thankful for George Matheson's wonderful hymn, "O Love That Will Not Let Me Go." You know that one, don't you? Matheson was Scottish, which feels appropriate for today. A 19th century preacher. I don't know if you know anything about him, but he was born with really poor eyesight, and he relied especially on his sister for help in his kind of young adult life, and kind of even up to the age of 40. He was 40 on the night she got married, and on the night she got married, he knew that she would have to let him go. She'd been looking after him, but she was getting married, and to an extent, she was going to have to let him go. And on that night, he experienced a deep crisis, and said that this deep suffering and crisis bore the fruit of this hymn, and the words that night just flowed in 5 minutes and just kind of was almost like a download. As we practice letting go, in particular this week, of the constancy we associate with the Queen's reign and all that evokes, let's remember that there is but one constant in the end that does endure forever. A constant that the Queen's life and death points us towards. So I'm going to read Matheson's words now, and I know they're familiar, but just as we close, try to listen to them through fresh ears tonight, and just allow these to bless you as we think about letting the Queen go into the loving arms of God, who will never let us go. O love that will not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be. O light that followest all my way, I yield my flickering torch to thee. My heart restores its borrowed ray, that in thy sunshine's blaze its day may brighter, fairer be. O joy that seekest me through pain, I cannot close my heart to thee. I trace the rainbow through the rain and feel the promise is not vain, that morn shall tearless be. O cross that liftest up my head, I dare not ask to fly from thee. I lay in dust life's glory dead, and from the ground there blossoms red life that shall endless be. I'm going to ask Catherine to put a link in the chat to a sublime version of that hymn by Martin Joseph, which you could listen to in a moment if you just copy it for now, and then you can paste it once we've said goodbye. Why don't we end by saying the Lord's Prayer together? Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. There's also, of all things, a full moon tonight, the harvest moon, welcoming the season of autumn and its many rich, mellow, fruitful gifts. So if you're able to, why not step outside a little bit later and enjoy the moon's gentle light if it's come out from behind the clouds. And remember each other in this community, and anyone who's physically distant from you, that you love and care for and miss. And just welcome God's love in that moonlight that reaches to us all. Soul, clap your hands and sing, and louder sing. The promise is not vain, that morn shall tearless be. Thank you so much for joining me on this different kind of YouTube Live night. I hope that this space has been in some ways helpful just for us to gather some thoughts. If I don't see you on an autumn walk, and they are all full up now, so thank you for your response, and I'm sorry if you've missed out, but if I don't see you on an autumn walk, see you for Advent. It won't be too long. In the meantime, God bless you and go well. Don't forget just to listen to Martin Joseph's rendition of "O Love That Will Not Let Me Go" as well, because it really is sublime. It's just in the comments for just a few more moments before I click end. Thank you.